Hello again, mathematicians. As you start to get your second robot put together and you're getting ready to install the expansion hub, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to go around the expansion hub and look at the different drivers and ports that are on there, because some of you may not have caught it the first time around. And so let's assume this is a bit of an education for you. Over here on this side, right here, this is where you typically would put in the motor. These are 12-volt ports, and there's 4 of them, hence they can drive 4 12-volt motors. There is inside this something called a MOSFET. There are MOSFETs that drive each one of those motors with quite a bit of amperage, and so some specialty software is put on the inside. Included in this is something called a proportional integral derivative controller, which is only activated when you run under encoder control. Encoder, what's that? Well, as you guys know, there are little marks on a wheel on each of the motors that can actually determine how far the wheel turned. And there's a port right here, right next to that it plugs in, and the processor on the inside can read how many ticks of the encoder have moved. Something important to know is that these are 3.3 volts. Let me repeat that, 3.3 volts, and most of the other motors from the other companies, and that's what we have, Tetrix and Neverest, are 5 volt. And so if you look at the cable that goes from the motor to that port, there's a little connector, and I think it has a little light on it that shifts. It's called a level shifter, and it shifts from 5 volts down to 3.3 volts. And so as you put this in there and you start to drive it, I don't know how many of those were in the original bag, so you may have to order some more of those very quickly in order for this to actually work. It's unclear. Alright, so 4 motors, 20 amps, which is a lot of power going through this thing. And okay, now down at the bottom here, is where we would connect in the servos. And this piece of information that you may not have gleaned from if you even read it at all, is that there are obviously six servos you can drive with this, and they're in pairs that limit the amount of power that can go out. So 0 and 1 can use 2 amps, and 1 and 2 can use 2 amps. And I said that wrong. 0 and 1, 2 and 3, and 4 and 5 each can have 2 amps. So how may that impact you? Your grippers may work better, may work better if you would put one in one pair and put the other one in the other pair. You might try that to see if you get more grip on it. Okay, and so as we move on down here, oh, by the way, for those of you who didn't pay attention, there is a key on the left over here that shows you that what's ground, which would be the dark color, what's the power, that'd be the red one in the middle, and then the signal is the orange one on the right. I have purchased a couple extra servos, and I believe we actually purchased a couple other of the original, the 485s from Hi-Tech, which is what you've been using. But these are much more much less expensive. Got those off of Amazon. I think they cost about $8, and the other ones cost like $28. These are not really well built, but they seem to be very powerful. And so since they only have to live a couple of months, you may find that these work acceptable. I do not know, haven't tried. I've actually run them, so they work. And you'll like the fact they have a little metal gear and all that stuff. So 2 of those are coming your way. As we get down to the end down here, there are 2 5-volt ports, and this is where, and they actually were very fortunate. You can use one of the servo connectors. It's one of the extenders. I bought you a bag of those, and you can use that as a way of connecting in. And so if you have LEDs, you would there's LEDs going on. Oops, I covered it up there. Sorry about that. So you can put LEDs. There it goes. You can put LEDs on there. It's not switched, so when you're done, you'll have to disconnect it or disconnect the battery if you decide to put some decorations on here. Over here are analog, which we have not used. It was able to read analog input So what's the battery voltage, what's a potentiometer setting, those types of things, which are probably not something that you even at this point in time care or know about as your eyes glass over. The digital one in here is for like limit switches. Like we've been fortunate enough that through Cunning and Guile we've been able to avoid that particular thing, but that little switch that's laying there somewhere in the room is something that you can actually program and read that switch. Is it on or off? And they have 4 of those that you can do there. The next one is I2C, which is a protocol, serial protocol that was developed by Siemens, I believe, back in the early 80s. Allows this thing to talk to smart sensors, and your red, green, blue camera or color sensor. If you'll notice in there, there's actual circuit board inside that little black box up there, and so it's got smarts, and they talk back and forth to each other. One's called a slave, one's called a master, and they're able to communicate back and forth. And so it's a very modern and a very sophisticated interface. And then we have what they call UART, Universal Asynchronous Remote Transmitter, and in this particular case you can connect 2 of these expansion ports together and get 8 motors, 12 servos if you decide to go upscale and get fancy and want to break the bank. So a quick spin around. I would take a look at seeing if that down here at the bottom on the servos, whether you actually can get a little more grip if you put these in a different pair, one of them in one and one in another one on that one. Okay, a little quick walk around the expansion hub. One thing that I also wanted you to know, and you've seen this before, is that I believe the servos are as long as they work. So if there's a case where you like to have another small grip like you're going after the Relic, here's a really small servo, and it does work, by the way. You can plug it right into it just like the other one, and if someday if you get really excited, they make really big servos too. So I have the Binford of servos in this particular one, and you can move some really big stuff from that. But for right now, I think most of the stuff that you have will meet these medium size things. So very good. And one last thing, when you're done with it, I put a little sign on the back that said, please return it to me when you're finished with the season, because I think it would be really interesting to see if you could use all of this exact same equipment to run a robot electronic supported wheelchair. And it'd be really cool to see if that would work, and I'd like to give that a shot. So when you're all done with it, why don't you send it back to me. Thank you very much. Good luck.